Hi there, welcome. Hello, everyone. You're very welcome to this talk this morning. My name is Stephen Knott. I'm the director of the Craft Study Centre. You're very welcome to this lovely talk that we've arranged as part of the launch event of Farnham Craft Town. And it's a discussion between Ewan Clayton and Rosalind Wyatt. Got just a very brief welcome. I'll try and keep it brief so we have maximum time for the discussion. Just a few housekeeping notices. Probably the toilets are just out to the right. We're going to be in discussion for about 45 minutes or so, 30 minutes to 45 minutes, and then we'll ask questions from the floor afterwards and sort of, segue into sort of your participation. And the other thing is, when you leave today after the event, it'd be really great if you could pick up an evaluation card. It's in my hand, and there's some out there, just to give some feedback about your experience of this talk and the day as a whole. So this launch event here in Frensham Heights School is the start of Farnham Craft Month, which is a big festival of craft and celebration of craft that takes place throughout the whole of October, of more than 150, I said 100 here, but then the mayor said 150 events of workshops, tours, open studios, discussions, and even a procession, which is the Lantern Festival on the 31st of October. So Farnham residents are very lucky to have this great infrastructure here of craft, but equally anyone who's made their way here today, you're very, very welcome. I just have a couple of thank yous, and then I'll switch to the slides. During the discussion, there's going to be a whole series of work, mainly by Rosalind and Ewan, with a few of the installation shots from the Craft Study Centre show. So that will kind of just rotate throughout our discussion. With the supporters of today, we've got the Farnham Maltings, the University of the Creative Arts, the New Ashgate, and the Farnham Town Council. And with the Craft Study Centre, we are the steering members of the Farnham Craft Town Partnership, which is the year. We also want to thank the Irene Wellington Educational Trust and the Society of Scribes and Illuminators that you see here that have made today's event possible. The Society of Scribes and Illuminators is a calligraphy society, one of the oldest in the world, whose history follows the modern revival of calligraphy that started about 120 years ago with the kind of pioneering work of Edward Johnston. Irene Wellington Educational Trust is named after the distinguished calligrapher Irene Wellington, who was pioneering in developing the same art calligraphy in the immediate post-war period in particular. And both Johnston, who I mentioned, and Irene Wellington figure in the Craft Study Centre show on which this event is based, called Fluidity and Inscription. Before I move that, just please, after today's talk, this morning actually, we had this wonderful demonstration of the work of Mary Noble, who produced this and just left it when she had to dash off just now, which I didn't want to see go in the bin. And then this afternoon, the letter carver Matt Laughlin, who's here, will also be demonstrating from 2. So after the talk, please just mingle, have a bit of time to eat, listen to the music, and see Matt kind of working on his easel. Brilliant. So I'll just move the slides along, and then there you go. I won't have to go back there now. He'll just rotate. So I mentioned that the talk today is based on the exhibition at the Craft Study Centre called Fluidity and Inscription, which is basically a celebration of calligraphy in the Craft Study Centre's collections. So the Craft Study Centre has a collection of 20th and 21st century British craft across textiles, ceramics, calligraphy and lettering, and furniture and wood. This exhibition, Fluidity and Inscription, came from the fact that we hadn't featured a kind of calligraphy exhibition. It was a part of an exhibition a year or so ago, but we wanted to kind of celebrate some of its more fluid or kind of colourful expressions, and then take that as a basis to explore the media and writing across all the different media in the collections. So brushwork on ceramics and inscription on stone. And so the idea of fluidity and inscription is the idea of fluidity being on top of a surface with ink, paint, brushwork, and inscription being scratching through the surface. So 2 different ways of applying marks to the surface and making a kind of communicating a message. And this was the real theme of the show that kind of we sort of lent to the kind of underpinning of this event today, and certainly this talk. So you can see some of the slides from the show here, and I'd very much obviously encourage you to see this. It's on until May next year, so you've got plenty of time to come and then come again. So we very much welcome you when we do it. We're going to switch now to the talk. So I'm really thrilled to be able to welcome Ewan Clayton and Rosalind Wyatt. Ewan Clayton is the nation's foremost calligrapher. And
not true. It is
one, okay.
Well, a well-known one. I think that probably is said.
Author of The Golden Thread, and he's also designed for the Royal Cipher for the Queen Consort, and was key advisor to the British Library's recent exhibition, Making Your Mark. And Rosalind Wyatt is a visual artist with a multidisciplinary practice that has its roots in the art of the hand. And Wyatt has developed an embroidery practice, writing with a needle, that involves translating other people's handwriting into stitch. She is exhibited at the Sharjah Calligraphy Biennial of the New Craftsman in London, and is engaged in the ongoing project, The Stitch Lives of London, which I think you'll see in some of the slides coming up. Both of their work will be appearing, and hopefully it will tie in things that you're discussing. In completely serendipitous moments. So yeah, that's my little introduction. So we get started, and I'm going to ask you a very simple question. Who are you? Just introduce yourself to the audience.
Don't go deep.
Okay, fine.
How did you get into calligraphy?
Oh, that's easy.
God,
Well, I had terribly bad handwriting. That's how I got in. When I was 12 years old, I was put back into the 7 and 8 year olds class to relearn how to write. And people gave me calligraphy books to inspire me. Tom Goody's Italic Handwriting, books like that. But also, I was in the village of Ditchling. That's where my school was, and my first school. And so my grandparents knew Edward Johnston, and they told me about him. My grandmother used to do Scottish country dancing with Mrs. Johnston. And so they just said, well, if you've got bad handwriting, you need to know about Edward Johnston. So I was given his biography to read. And I realized you could have a whole life in letters and calligraphy, which was a big surprise to me. And that's what I've done really so far. But it was my weakest suit. And in some ways it still is.
Yeah.
What about you, Ros?
So I learnt to write with a dip pen and nib, thanks to my mum. Because when I was sort of 4 or something, I couldn't write. And for some, my sort of family was very creative. So they had a calligraphy board.
Yeah.
And she put me at the calligraphy board with a dip pen, and she just said I just was mesmerized by the ink, the flow of the ink, and that's how I learnt to write.
Wow.
And then I guess something went in. But I didn't obviously know it was calligraphy then. But it was sort of the forming of letters and language at quite a young age.
Mine gave me a platinum pen set. One of the cartridge pen things.
Okay.
Fountain pens that you could write with the calligraphy set.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she then learned to write as well at the same time, italic handwriting. So that inspired me too. So my mum was very important in that.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about an education down the fields? Did you have a gap and then come back to it at art school? Or
Never went to art school.
Okay. Well, I did go to a school, quite a progressive school, that was very into the arts and the crafts, really. And a lot of our teachers were sort of very professional artists. And so the calligraphy came back then, but I hated it, absolutely hated it. And just remember the ink going everywhere and reservoirs falling off and ink down my hand and, all of that. And so that's my memory from school, and I sort of really got into more sort of drama and theatre and stuff like that, and drawing and art. And then when it came to degree, I stumbled across this amazing degree. Of Ewan was my professor.
Well, just a teacher.
well, you were pretty.
Anyway.
Yeah. So that
we met.
That's how we met. and that was Roehampton, and that was a BA degree in calligraphy and, as you know, calligraphy and bookbinding. And I felt that I spent 3 years learning to write again. That's what it felt like.
It was pretty miraculous having a course where you could spend 3 years learning calligraphy and allied skills like bookbinding.
Extraordinary.
Yeah, brilliant,
Yeah.
exceptional.
And all the history,
Yeah,
and the anthropology behind
yes,
it.
because being a degree, it has to have a
Extraordinary.
theoretical component. And that was quite tricky dreaming that up, actually, to start with. You know, as you approach it as a craftsman, then having to become, in a sense, an academic, because I helped write the degree,
Yes.
to then sort of invent, well, now what is the theoretical background for all of this? We were very lucky with people to help us with that.
Yeah.
With your own education, did you have a gap, and then how did you end up being able to write that
Well,
program?
I found that calligraphy was useful. That was the thing. At school, it was very useful. When I got into it about 12, the very first job I had was from a fellow pupil who wanted me to do a birthday card for his mother. So I wrote out "The pen is mightier than the sword" with sort of tendrils of illumination all round it. And we agreed that I would do it, and we would swap, and he'd give me a 3D postcard. So that was my first pay for calligraphy, was a 3D postcard. It was of an aquarium with tropical fish. I still have it.
Oh.
It was stunning.
That was your first commission, wasn't it? Yes.
So then I left school and went to university thinking I'd be a psychologist. But the course was mostly about seagulls and rats, really, which I didn't think was quite what I got turned on by reading Jung's Memories, Dreams and Reflections when I was about 16 and thought, that's what I want to do. But I was just learning about seagulls. So I changed to what I really loved, which was history, medieval history. I'd had a terrible disaster with my A-levels. I got grade E for history. And I resat it, and I got grade E the second time as well, which is very ironic since I've written a history book now. Yeah. Anyway, when I got to university, I discovered I was good at history.
Yeah.
And so I then was able, because it was a Scottish university, to do a joint honours. And what I did is I thought, well, if I'm going to be here for 4 years, which is a long time on the coasts of the North Sea, I had better do something I love. So basically what I love is writing. So I thought, well, I'll do the elements of psychology that relate to writing. So it was neurophysiology, memory, cognition, language production. And I'll do everything from history that involves manuscript study. So that was Anglo-Saxon Europe, Carolingian Europe. And I put those together and did a degree in that.
But was it practical? What was the practical aspect?
Well,
of that?
I mean,
Done it.
in the last 2 years, I was with this Professor Buller, who was the English-speaking expert on Charlemagne, and he would give us Latin documents that we had to look at and read. And there was only like 6 of us in the class. So it was pretty intense, and you really felt you were getting, the truth about the Charlemagne thing. And then when I left, I got a different sort of education, because I had got to know Irene Wellington. And she had been a great friend of Julian Brown, the paleographer at London. And she said, I'm going to write to him. You should go to his classes. So she did. And he let me sit in on all his classes and seminars for a year, free, without being a student at the university. And he would ask me questions. What do you think about this? What? How possible is this? Do you think this is a mistake? So I got a really good paleographical education through that. But at the same time, the course had started at Roehampton, and it was the first year. And I signed up for that, thinking I would do bookbinding, because I thought I was really bad at anything to do with lettering, but I was interested. But I discovered that actually I knew a fair amount. So then I became Anne's assistant the following year. And then I had a time out in a monastery. And then eventually when I left that, she said, well, why don't you come back and have a day teaching at Roehampton? So that got me back into calligraphy then. So, yeah.
Brilliant. Fantastic. And how did you, well, I'm going to go to the kind of core question really that I want to ask, which is about what you mentioned already, like working across different materials. And so writing on different materials is really like a core question that comes from the exhibition. So maybe we've seen a few of your pieces of work in the background. Maybe can you explain how you moved from where you started with lettering, and then kind of key first moves away from, let's say, ink to textiles in your case?
Well, I think it's all about communication, actually. It's actually all about this. And that for me is like the most present, the most vibrant. It's human to human, the human voice, the transmission of humanity, emotion, feeling, so much, really. And so I think that's where I'm coming from, really. And then the next thing for me is like, how do we leave our marks? After we've gone, what are these traces on paper or stone or sand or whatever? And somehow that is linked to this sort of essential core of what it is to be human and what it is to communicate, sort of, I don't know, beyond culture, beyond language, because the marks we leave are just so unique. So back to your question.
We just had one of your stitch projects for London on the back of the GP, the scrubs.
Yeah.
And I suppose it's like what happens when you translate a kind of written handwriting into embroidery.
Into embroidery.
The thread.
Everything slows down. I mean, it slows down.
Right.
And it's interesting that your piece is about tranquility. Because I think, it's the spaces in between, isn't it? It's the silence behind, which is very mysterious.
Because I was looking at the pictures and you've got, incredible, like, trails of thread there. How are they fixed?
Oh, okay. Well,
You've got little-
that's quite a funny story, actually.
Right.
Because, well, funny. Because, so the way I started, I went from calligraphy lettering was, I used to do art in action, which we also met at. And so I was in the calligraphy tent and I was sort of doing this sort of big broad calligraphy, brushy stuff with ink, whatever. And suddenly I sort of became aware of the audience, if you like. And so, and then I did art in action throughout my life. It was a very important sort of part of my education in terms of meeting other professionals, in terms of talking to people. And so from the calligraphy, I then went into textiles. Why? I think because there was a tutor at Roehampton, I think it was Hazel, I'd started drawing, painting letters on cloth. And I always, like, I don't know, had a sort of anxious thing about where do you fit in? How do you express voice? How, a curiosity of where and how. And so from Roehampton, I went to the Royal College of Art and I knocked on many, many doors at that college and a lot shut. But there was one tutor there who really understood the importance of craft, and she was in the textile department. And so I managed, after 2 years, to find a place on the textile department, having done very little stitching at all. Okay, and so there I was in the School of Fashion and Textiles with this very traditional background of craft, which was very emotional and sort of full of sensibility, smack into the Royal College of Art, which was like fashion and textiles and quite sort of sharp, and so again it was like, where do I fit in? Where do I fit in? And I actually went to the libraries. I went to the British Library because I felt safe there. I felt safe amongst books and documents, a bit like you with the Roman. It opened up a quiet space. And basically, doing a textile course, you have to use cloth.
Yes.
And so I tried all these different departments in textiles. I tried print, I tried weave, I tried fashion, But what I kept coming back to was the needle.
Gosh.
And I think it was because I felt I was in touch. I was in touch.
It's those same fingers,
Okay.
isn't it? You know, it's calligraphy, holding a pen.
Yeah.
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 Gosh. So you
And
had that manual skill in a way.
I had the manual skill of the calligraphy. And, you know, although, you know, it was hard in a way that those 3 years, 2 years, I think I did a lot of growing in that time because I knew that I was trying to find my voice, my unique voice. I knew that that's the point, isn't it, as an artist, is to find your voice and to sort of release.
Found it.
I don't know.
Probably means you have.
I don't know. You tell me. I don't know. Again, it's the audience thing, isn't it? It's so important that well, I go back to your piece, your tranquility. You know, just that simple word. It's what the viewer feels when they see that. And yes, you can just read the word, but it's kind of what you feel, isn't it? And then you discover that you dyed the paper. Tell us about that piece.
But funnily enough, the piece underneath is what's interesting to me, because underneath there's a thing, one of the pages from a book that I made for the Crafts Study Centre, and it's a section from my diary of visiting Shoji Hanada's house. And it was a bit of a challenge when I went to look around the exhibition to myself when I read it, because it's a quote from Shoji Hamada, and he says, how do you know something's beautiful or not? Beauty is not in the head, it's not in the heart, it's in the abdomen.
Belly.
Yes. So for me, I had to go around the exhibition and feel what it was like to stand in front of all the objects, not to look at them, but to kind of be with them in a way. And that is a slowing down and a being present, which you must be as you're stitching the handwriting and things of people. And it was very interesting walking around it, feeling it. You know, standing in front of the plates, for instance, I noticed my shoulders relaxed. And I realized that's because I was imagining holding this plate. In front of Shoji Hamada's vase, just felt completely rooted to the ground. I mean, it was fantastic. The squareness and solidity of it. And then realizing the fragility of a blossom that might have actually gone in the top, you know? And it was very interesting. Do you have that sort of reaction to things?
I'm not sure, but just for the information, Shoji Hamada is a Japanese potter who we've got collections of at the Craft Study Centre.
Yeah.
And one of his works, it doesn't appear on the slides, but one of them is this phenomenal kind of squared bottle with a kind of slip decoration brushwork. And it is quite phenomenal and a core element of our ceramic collection at the Craft Study Centre. I'm going to take chair's prerogative and just fire back a question. That's really interesting about the kind of the presence and the slowing down. I will say about tranquility, as it kind of is the thing that struck me when flicking through all the different calligraphy images on the database when I knew that we were going to go with this exhibition about this time last year on this kind of theme that had been discussed with a colleague who I should credit, Lucia Manopoulou. She said she'll be here today, but she and I kind of at UCA had this discussion about this kind of event. So thanks to her. But it's like fluidity and inscription, and the tranquility is the slowing down. It's the word for me. It was like, this is needed in this age and in my job. There's no tranquility finding, and with two young children. And so tranquility, and that just was really, it's appealing vitality, the kind of pair that was being on the screen that you sent on your images. These are kind of words that you spend time reading. And it's just such a beautiful contrast to how normally I'm reading, which is efficiency and speed. I've gone into overdrive, I think. And I think this is the way for a lot of working people. And so was the real appeal of tranquility. And then I realized that when I first wrote the label, I got the spell check wrong because it took it to an American spelling.
Yes, and
And
it's
it's
a
a double
L.
L, which I thought, well, that's interesting as
Mm,
well. And
yeah,
because
It's got quill in the middle of it.
it's got quill in it, it's got the double L, and in this country, double L is in Wales as well. There's an interest in double L's in it, and it looks they're two different. You've written them differently.
Yeah,
They're
it
not like the same.
was a
and-
big risk, that.
How
Yeah.
say?
Well, it was the end of a day in Tokyo, and I bought the paper already dyed.
Okay.
Yeah, it's dyed with persimmon juice, khaki.
Beautiful.
She was called, and it's handmade paper, and I had a stack of it. And all the students, I've been working from about 9 in the morning, really intense way, till about 4:30. And everyone had left the classroom. And I was taking a very deep breath. And I was feeling tranquil. I thought, oh, at last, peacefulness. And so I reached over one of the pieces of paper and I wrote on it, tranquility. And actually, the one that you have was the third one that I wrote. The previous two weren't any good. They were working out the stroke order, because that first L comes down and it just, I think, it lifts off on a corner of the nib. And then the arm sweeps right the way around out here in a continuous movement and comes onto the paper up there and then comes down here and then has a different lift off. And to start off with, I hadn't got all those things quite right, and the words were too big on the page. And so I had to scale it down. And then on the third one, it all came good. But I think of them as a kind of meditation piece. One of the things I like doing is writing a word and having it as almost like a kind of mandala or icon. I think of them as word icons, really, in a way. Yeah.
Is there such a thing across culture? I mean,
It's a good point. Well, I suppose the
monks with the inscriptions in the church.
the opening of the Quran, that phrase at the opening of the Quran, which you see often, God the merciful and powerful.
I'm just going to quickly
Yeah.
push the slides on so that people can see.
There's one piece in the exhibition that's a bit like that, which I kept coming back to, which was the piece by Ranti Bam. That's the one piece that stayed with me. It's this extraordinary built pot out of slabs, but also the clay is woven at the top. And the clay has had cloth pressed into it. So you see the weave in there, which is a very old technique. I mean, some of the very earliest pots we have from Europe have got string and things pressed into them. And reading about it, she says sometimes she uses them almost like a hearth. And I thought that was a very interesting idea, that you could have something like that as a focal point in a room, like a kettle on a fire.
Yeah.
Or
Like in Sokinawa, they have
Okinawa, yes, that's
like
right.
an altar shrine space
In a Japanese house, yeah, with a flower maybe in front.
Sort of focal point, isn't it?
And it's often calligraphy, isn't it? But
Yeah.
have you made things like that?
Yeah. I mean, I think I approach each garment like that, actually.
That's interesting.
They're sort of like a whole cosmos in themselves,
Yeah.
and I don't really know what is coming first. So it could be the story, it could be the cloth, it could be the handwriting. So it's those three things that sort of come together. Maybe I should talk about the latest commission I've just done, because that's sort of quite present in my mind. So it's for a museum. Maybe I'm not saying anyway. But anyway, it's for a museum. And they gave me all the archives. So I had a large archive to work with, which includes photographs, handwriting, documents, all about this individual. So it's extensive, which you don't always get, actually.
Right.
Sometimes you just say, do a piece on, whoever, and you have to go sifting in the archive. So, which is interesting in itself. But anyway, I had the whole archive, and a bit like you said, Stephen, you have to sort of absorb a lot of information very quickly, almost. And it's almost like filling your pot up as quickly as you can and then letting it settle and seeing and seeing what lands almost. And then, is this, does it have to have a function? In this case, it had to have a function. So, in fact, I was working all in polyester.
Gosh. Why?
Because it's very light filled space, and also moths don't like polyester.
Oh, yeah.
So there were my sort of restrictions, and then there are sort of like little elements that come back to you. So he was Italian, but he was a Londoner, and so I had the Italian flag in my head. He wore a work coat, which was white, so I had this sort of crisp whiteness, green, white, red, and then lots of visual play things, like when you create a seam on the inside of a garment, there's a machine called an interlocker, which finishes the edge of the fabric. And I suddenly thought, oh, I've always loved an interlocker, and it's on the inside as well. You won't see a picture of it, but it's on the inside of a garment, which I quite like. And I thought, what if you put it on the outside of a garment, and you do one edge of the garment green and then the other edge red, and then I had the Italian flag. I just thought, oh, and it was just fun.
Yeah.
So that was one fun element. And then the handwriting, his signature was so stylish. He was just a street worker, but he had this beautiful, florid, very Italian signature. So I knew that had to go on. So it's like all of these elements becoming very essential, coming to a point, so that hopefully, if he were here, he'd look at it and he'd think, yeah, I like that. That's, and if other people like it as well, then that's great.
I was just going to quickly chip
Yeah.
in with, and it's timely with this. I was hoping for this, but your work involves quite a lot of performance, or like installation.
Yes, installation.
And you mentioned about how performance was quite important
Yeah.
early on. You went,
Yes. Yeah.
learnt drama and things. So I wonder about, and you both talked about the performativity of calligraphy, or I was talking with someone about it earlier with Mary's demonstration, that there's an inbuilt performance
Yes.
to calligraphy and lettering. So I've wondered how you've taken that into other media, like
I think,
installations have you done?
okay.
Yeah.
All right. What installations have I done? Well, that was actually for the outside of a design stand, if you like, for the new craftsman. And they wanted it to look very as if it was on a blackboard being rubbed out. They didn't want anything neat about it. And they gave me a load of words that related to craft process, which I loved. I mean, amazing words I'd never come across.
How interesting.
And then they just said, just go for it, And I think there's a lot of freedom in that, and that I think is a mark of a really good performance. Actually, is when you just let go, because that's it's like walking into, I don't know, a theatre after a performance, or a temple after the chant, or a church after, and it's sort of, it's almost like the atmosphere is filled, is almost vibrating with that. I think that's a real thing. I think that's sort of spine-tinglingly amazing. So the performance is seen and unseen. I think if every part of the process of making has got that, dare I say, intensity, that authenticity, that commitment. It's commitment, isn't it? You feel it.
Yes. I think it's almost like making spells, actually, sometimes.
Don't call me a witch, please.
No. I feel it happens to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You write something and it happens. I mean, it is really weird.
Do we agree with that?
Well, that's my experience.
Yes.
I mean, one of the pieces in the Crafts Study Centre's portfolio, it was, as I was writing, I was remembering this particular person I used to go dancing with. He was a fantastic Latin American guy. Oh, it's just amazing. And and actually it really inspired the calligraphy. And when I'd finished it, the phone rang.
No.
Yeah. And actually he was going to be in Brighton that night, and I hadn't seen him for 10 years. I mean, it was really amazing. So little things like that often happen, I think, when you really commit. But I think the other thing that struck me there is what we're doing there is we're talking from inside the experience of making rather than looking at it. So what's important for me is that it's actually a really joyful thing to do. So it's the doing of it which makes it really worthwhile. There's that phrase that's in the exhibition, which David Howells wrote out from William Morris, which is, did I write it down here? Not sure I did, but it's really saying that actually what makes something really worthwhile is that it's joyful to do. And I think that's definitely why I do calligraphy, because it's actually joyful to do. Yeah. Yeah, so that says content down on the right-hand side. You can't read it. Yeah. And that says voice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was just going to ask a question about the global cultural influences in your work. Maybe you know you kind of, I was reading about an article online about kind of Arabic calligraphy being influenced, but also Japan. A lot of the slides up here,
Yes, Japan.
your projects from
Just from traveling, really.
yeah, just picking up along the way.
And in a way, I've always been interested in reaching out beyond things. I think I've always been interested in the margins of things and in the other, which isn't really the other, you know. And so that's just how I am as a person. But I suppose I've traveled a lot. So I've traveled to teach. I've traveled to teach in Pakistan. I've traveled to teach in Japan many times. And that being there and talking to calligraphers in those different cultures has then really influenced me in terms of tools and materials. You can see it in the Japanese paper on the right. Actually, very fine Japanese paper on the left there as well, though that's written with a reed on the left. And reed pens from the Arabic tradition. I'm increasingly interested in that. I think also the other thing is, those years when I was a monk, which can either drive you mad or make you say, I got very interested in going beyond those traditions into the Arabic, more mystical traditions, into Japanese Zen culture and all of that, because I was trying to think, how do I find my place as a craftsman with some kind of, and I really find the word spirituality slightly awkward because I'm somebody who really believes that body and soul are together as one kind of incredible complex, really. And just to use that word seems to split things. And I don't know quite how to be non-dualistic about it, but the non-dualistic traditions in those different cultures have been really interesting to me. That's probably what took me into the calligraphies in those cultures most, is that. And I love, dialoguing with other calligraphers and finding out how the brush works and how people think about learning calligraphic forms and shapes, how they talk about them. The vocabulary in Chinese and Japanese calligraphy is fantastic.
Yes. 100 ways to describe a line, right?
And so much more poetic than our ways.
Yes.
So
we need to learn a lot. I think educationally we need to learn a lot from that approach.
Yes.
Because there's nothing, my crits at the Royal College of Art was savage. They were savage, and that's hard, it's hard really, for anybody. And I know people who never recovered from them as well.
Yes, I think tragic.
So
It's
I
happened in
think
calligraphy too.
yes. Well, everyone's got one of them, but I think what I learned from going to Japan was you'd have appreciation. That was the crit. It was appreciation of what you've done. So the whole word is different. And it doesn't mean that, you weren't flawed at the end of it, but somehow you were kind of you were supported in the criticism.
There's a wonderful phrase in feminist sort of scientific circles in a park where I used to work, which was generative discussions rather than critical critiques. Generative discussions. That is a critique in a way.
Yeah.
So it's a generative, it's
And
constructive.
it's got the word generation. Yeah. It's a continuum, isn't it? It's not just a.
Yeah.
Do you find the English language difficult to work with, like English letters and?
Yes, I do.
I don't.
Great. Why not?
I don't.
And I'll tell you what I do.
I think because I think one of our greatest fathers of language, Shakespeare, was here, and I feel that a lot of my sort of upbringing, I sort of heard that, and it stretched my imagination, and I think with that language, it takes you somewhere, and it's not. I mean, a lot of people struggle to understand, and again, it's not about understanding. I think it's about hearing. So when you hear the meter of a sonnet, actually, there was a sonnet in this one. This piece was for the UAE, but I had this idea of the 10th muse, and that's in Sonnet 37, which is this hanging here.
Yeah.
And he says, "Be thou the 10th muse, 10 times more in worth than those old 9, which rhymers advocate."
Yeah.
So it's like, what's the 10th muse? So the English language, I think, is so rich. And I think in terms of the shape of the letters, I've stitched a lot of handwriting. What can I say about it? I mean, it goes from left to right, left to right, left to right. It sort of bobbles along the line, doesn't it? There are lots of variations within that. It can slant forward, it can slant back. People have lots of different opinions on that.
I think you're quite lucky in a way working with thread, because I think what that does is it does slow people down and it does make them look. So because it's unfamiliar in some degree, there's a certain puzzle there. The problem that I have sometimes is that you write things and people just read it in a flash.
Yeah.
And they think that's it. They don't stay with it in any way. And the trick is to somehow allow people to remain with it. So that's why I like, say, Edward Johnston's sonnet that he wrote, one of Shakespeare's ones, in a slightly Gothicized hand. And he says it's deliberately to slow people down as they read, so the words really sink in.
Okay.
But the other problem I have is because I'm trying often to do an expressive mark, there are words that are not expressive, like the and and an. And whereas say if I'm writing in Latin, I haven't got so many of those words. I know that's not going to communicate to so many others.
Do you actually think in Latin? Yeah.
No, but I do invest myself in the word, so that it becomes. So I live with the words, and I get to know them and that sort of thing. So I get more of a world within a Spanish word, than I do, say, an English one sometimes. And there's a lot of scattered words that haven't got a particular emotional impact in English.
Yeah, there's the kind of, that was what I was saying earlier about kind of the efficiency of English language, that, being one of the most spoken languages, people read it just to get to the meaning without dwelling or without sort of thinking about how it is being communicated or the voice behind it. It's kind of fascinating.
It was very interesting for me during the years I was in the monastery. Eventually, I was able to do calligraphy in the monastery. They didn't know I was a calligrapher when I arrived there. But you would do something for Christmas and have it up in the church, and you'd be going in there 5 times a day to pray. And if your words couldn't sustain being read 5 times a day for several weeks, everyone, would just go crazy. So you couldn't have Jesus lives or something like that. Everyone think, here we go again. You've got to have something that had a kind of mystery that you could lose yourself in, almost like a mantra, which you could say again and again and see different things in it. And that was very interesting, doing things for that sort of situation. Yeah.
And do you think that is, we've talked a lot about the margins between cultures, or at the edge of our at the edge of our culture, there are these, and it is those blurred margins, isn't it, if you like? Do you think it's there that there is this joy or this mystery or this needing to?
Wow. I mean, what you remind me there too of is the experience I had working at Xerox PARC, which is like in Silicon Valley, millions and millions of dollars thrown at it.
Yeah.
And all that we saw on our computers were grey, clunky letters.
Ugh.
And out in the car park in San Francisco, there was this fantastic graffiti. Absolutely fantastic. So colourful, so energetic. And that was the margins. And it was young people with being creative, with whatever came to hand in their own way, in completely disregarded spaces.
Free.
It was on the edge and it was free. And in fact, that reminds me, when we used to get together with the anthropologists, which was the most rewarding part of being at PARC, we used to have to get away from the place. We used to go to Norway. We used to fly to Norway. So we were outside the research lab in a forest.
Oh.
And we weren't being conformed by this corporate space, with its dying plants in the corners of brightly painted corridors, in air-conditioned rooms. It was so interesting that trying to find freedom is difficult.
It is difficult, isn't it?
I think on that note, it'd be great to switch over finding freedom to audience questions. So we've had a great discussion, but I wanted to leave enough time, and to invite any comments, thoughts,